Hey everyone, I am Nick Rossalillo. Welcome to Chipstock Investor. We thought we should spend a little bit more time on Microsoft earnings, their Q2 fiscal year 2023, but the 3 months ended December 2022. And with me today, I have someone who I've had the pleasure of working with for a while now in various capacities, so I'm excited to have him here. Zane Fracek, one of the hosts of Intern Investing. Zane, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here because usually I'm the one hosting you over at Intern Investing. So glad I can help, combine the audiences, build up some following on your channel, hopefully.
Before continuing, let me remind you to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if this video is helpful as you do your own investment research and increase your knowledge of business and technology. We really appreciate the support, as subscribing to the channel helps us continue putting out content like this.
But yeah, I'm excited to talk about Microsoft. It was an interesting quarter and one that there's just so much to talk about. I'm curious, I watched your video on your takeaways, but what do you think in general?
It was, besides the earnings themselves, everyone is talking about Microsoft in tandem with now ChatGPT, the fun little AI, generative AI text chat tool. It's fascinating. So I won't give an opinion yet. Let's talk about this, because I know you have some nice data visualizations to share about what's going on. And maybe just kind of show how Microsoft is playing some really serious offense right now.
Yeah, for sure. I think for Microsoft, looking at the quarter, right, we have a miss on the top line, slight barely beat on the bottom line if you're looking at non-GAAP, and then the stock spiked in the after hours 4% or so, and then it flattened out. And the way Microsoft's been trading is super interesting. It's up about 2% since right before it reported earnings. And if you look at, this is something I definitely wanted to talk about. Let me pull up the way it's been trading recently. You can see it's actually been underperforming year to date. Now, year to date is less than a month at this point, but still it's interesting to see the NASDAQ almost tripling Microsoft so far. So, it brings a question up in my mind. Is there still room for Microsoft to catch up? Or is there really a reason that Microsoft is falling behind? And I kind of am leaning towards Microsoft can catch up, because what I'm really excited about is cloud specifically. And so if you look at the segments, right, PC was kind of disappointing, but no one really expected it to be great, I think. But cloud, people were pretty happy with, because
Yes.
Azure growth was solid in constant currency, beating guidance by 1 percentage point, I believe. And we have super strong cloud revenue growth, and it's taking up more and more of Microsoft's overall revenue, up to 54%, which is really impressive.
So that cloud, that is impressive. That 54%. Now that's interesting, because Microsoft divvies up that cloud revenue a couple of different ways, right? They have just the cloud computing segment, but then sometimes they'll also pull out Microsoft 365, the Office suite, which is now a cloud service, and combine it with the enterprise products. So that number, that 54%, I think is an interesting metric, because it combines both together.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
That's a great thing to point out, because you can see here, okay, but then why is the intelligent cloud in terms of revenue by segment only 43%? Well, it's because not everything is included. The cloud touches more than just, what would be called the intelligent cloud with, Office 365 and other applications like that, for sure.
Yeah. So that's what makes this $10 billion investment into OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, so intriguing, right? I think sometimes investors see things like this, like AI, and they think, oh, Microsoft has a brand new segment to its business now. But that's not the case, right? What exactly is going to happen with this OpenAI investment?
I think it's interesting that, like you said, it's not probably going to be its own segment. It's going to be integrated into everything Microsoft already does. And I think that's why generally the sentiment is so positive around this acquisition, because it just makes sense. AI touches so many parts of their business, so investing tens of billions of dollars doesn't seem too bad. And I was interested to continue researching this and find that, Microsoft's been in a partnership with OpenAI for a while now. This is just the most recent investment by Microsoft. And I was trying to get a sense of the financials. And OpenAI is pitching that ChatGPT will bring in about 200 million in 2023 and $1 billion in 2024. So if you go with that number that it costs 100,000 per day to run, which is kind of an estimate, they'd still be losing money in 2023, but making some in 2024 if expenses don't change. So it's interesting how quick this investment could pay off. That's before any synergies,
Right.
Come together with search. And, the whole opportunity with Bing is interesting. And I want to get your take on that before, real quick. I can show Bing's
Promised I
market
was going to be surprised at this, whatever you're about to show me here.
Hopefully there's genuine amazement. And now it's not that impressive because, yes, it's this little black line on the bottom here. So it's not like jumping off the page. But still, if you look from kind of the end of 2018, Bing at 4% of desktop search market share, moving up to almost 9%. And this is kind of happening in the background, basically doubling their percentage market share while Google falls from 90 to 84. I think it's interesting, and I think ChatGPT could potentially accelerate this. But I'm no AI expert, so I don't know exactly how the integration would work out.
Yeah. So this, you said that's desktop search market share. So, I mean, I guess, mobile is where all the growth is at. But it's still notable because eventually at some point you have to think OpenAI, every time someone types a question into ChatGPT, it costs OpenAI like 3 cents. Not a big expense all by itself. But if you have millions and millions of people typing in these questions every single time to ChatGPT, you multiply that by hundreds of millions of people potentially at this point, typing in dozens of questions, the expense adds up. OpenAI at some point is probably going to need to start charging for that service.
Yeah.
If they start charging for it, people might start looking for where they can get ChatGPT for free, and it might be on Bing.
That's a good point. And now, so they're charging $42 a month, I believe, and that's, they still have it for free. But if you want basically to be the first in line, if they get overwhelmed with a lot of volume on ChatGPT, if you're paying premium, well, you're going to be closer to the front of the line and you'll be served quicker, which makes sense. And part of this ChatGPT story, I think, is everything that's built off of it. Everyone's like, include it in your startup, put it on your website. And yes, I think there's something to be said for that. But what happens now with everything that was built off of it for free? Are they going to stay using ChatGPT? Are they going to look for a free alternative? Or, I'm just curious kind of what the retention will be for that. And this is an interesting little side tidbit I wanted to throw in here. As I was going through the earnings call, it's obvious Microsoft is focused on AI, especially this investment. But AI was said over 30 times on the earnings call, which is just, obviously it's going to come up. But I think that just kind of highlights exactly how deep their focus is on AI moving forward.
Yeah, it's definitely an offensive play. They just served a pretty, in my opinion, what could be amounted to a pretty vicious strike to Amazon AWS, to Google Cloud, because as of yet, that's what OpenAI is going to be used for. Infuse Microsoft Azure cloud service and other cloud services with things like ChatGPT. If you're Amazon AWS or Google Cloud, how worried are you right now?
You know what? I'm actually pretty worried, especially because the ongoing trend has been for Microsoft taking a little bit of market share. And right now, Azure's up to 21%, at least by this metric as of last quarter. And I have to assume you're continuing to gain market share. So I'm definitely concerned. I think it was Google that went into the code red, at least that's what it's been called by some sources. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, I've also heard they called in the founders, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, to get ideas on where to go from here. But I'm pretty confident that Google will be fine in the long term, especially with their platforms. Like I saw on Twitter the other day, it's like, if someone offered you 25 grand to stop using YouTube forever, would you take it? And a significant portion of people are like, no, because it provides that much value. And obviously that's just YouTube, but I think Google's going to be fine. I mean, in terms of AI integration, maybe they fall behind a little bit, but this isn't going to be the only solution. Like ChatGPT isn't going to be the only of its kind, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point, because like Google developed some of the baseline technology.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. They have competing services. They've just been reluctant to release them at this point, but maybe that moves them off the sideline.
Yeah. And so I think what's interesting is kind of going back to the earnings a little bit. So like I said, Azure growth was pretty solid. Some people seem to be a little bit upset by it. But my thing is, if you're upset about cloud revenue or cloud growth slowing down, you must have been upset since 2018.
Right.
You must have been upset for the past couple of years. It's just going to happen as we return to, a more, I guess, normalized growth.
Sure.
And this is kind of outside of the topic of cloud a little bit. But I also wanted to talk about cybersecurity because, man, it's no joke. Like, they reported $15 billion as of early 2021, and now it's over a $20 billion segment for Microsoft, growing 40% year over year. So that's got to be taking market share, because I know darn well other cybersecurity companies aren't growing 40% year over year.
No.
So that's super exciting too.
That's funny you picked up on that little tidbit in the earnings call. I have a project open right now working on that exactly, because I saw the same metric too and thought, wow, that's troublesome if you're a pure play cybersecurity company and you're not growing at 40% like Microsoft is.
Yeah, for sure. And so cybersecurity is an area where I don't know if other companies should be worried, because they might be a little bit more niche. And I think especially companies like CrowdStrike that I'm really a fan of, I think they have a unique kind of offering, being a little bit lighter and having more preventative threat detection. But in terms of like the competition all around, Microsoft has been talking about building this super powerful supercomputer, and that's great. But I think they're not the only one. I think people are quick to, think that when someone announces something, it's some huge competitive advantage. But I also wanted to dive into that kind of thing, because I've heard you mention before, behind every supercomputer and mention of AI, there's a lot of other technologies involved. And that's kind of what your channel revolves around a little bit. So I wanted to ask you about the Fungible acquisition and what that means for their data processing unit tech and data centers and cloud and everything.
Yes. So the Fungible acquisition, it is really interesting. The rumor is it was $190 million purchase, right? Very tiny, especially when you compare that to the $10 billion OpenAI investment, potentially $69 billion takeover of Activision Blizzard, if that happens. Small potatoes for Microsoft. I think it remains to be seen what they're going to do with that at this point, but Fungible is a startup that does DPUs, data processing units. So a DPU is like a specialized CPU, basically, but it's tasked with coordinating the movement of data around a data center. So I think basically at this point, what Microsoft probably wants with it is they want to use the fungible DPU to maybe optimize data centers for their own personal use. And I think that makes a lot of sense because so many data center companies and operators like Microsoft, and they called this out in their earnings call, are dealing with energy efficiency problems right now. The higher cost of electricity is hurting data center companies. So I think at this point that might be all they're wanting to use fungible for, but who knows? That could change.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that makes more sense than them trying to turn this less than $200 million acquisition into a meaningful segment of Microsoft's business. That would be certainly impressive. One thing I definitely wanted to talk about, and maybe we can kind of end it here, is talking about our final takeaways and like, is this a good time to buy Microsoft? I'm not a shareholder of Microsoft, but I find myself more interested for a couple of reasons. I want to quickly share the valuation. Interesting to watch. Like I touched on the price movement, right? They've been below the NASDAQ in terms of their growth this year. We also have them trading at price to free cash flow that's basically pre-pandemic levels or early 2020 levels. So I think, and since then the fundamentals have been good. We have, higher revenue, strong earnings and cash flow. So, and there's also this whole opportunity with ChatGPT. And if you think that OpenAI investment pays off, I think right now could be a really good time to start investing in Microsoft. And I think CEO Satya Nadella is really proving himself, and obviously he has been over the past almost better part of a decade. Mm-hmm. But still, like he's doing incredible work, and I think getting behind that could be a good idea right now.
I agree, Zane. I'm not a direct Microsoft shareholder either, although it is the second position in two ETFs that I own, Vanguard Growth ETF and Vanguard Information Technology. So it ends up making up a significant portion of my portfolio via those two ETFs. But I agree with the take that it's time to at least start getting interested in Microsoft stock. That chart that you showed with the price to free cash flow, you could look back a decade ago and say, well, it's like almost triple the valuation it was a decade ago, but Microsoft has earned it over that time. It went from like kind of a commoditized software business to a top player in cloud under Satya Nadella's purview over his guidance in that period of time. And again, like you point out here with the OpenAI investment, this looks like it can be a secular growth trend for Microsoft for the foreseeable future. Then also you have to consider later on in 2023, you have the US dollar headwinds will start to subside. That could boost earnings and profitability as well. I think it looks a bit more artificially inflated valuation-wise than it is. So I agree with you. I think it's an attractive business to at the very least keep a very close watch on.
Yeah, I think because, another reason for that is it's so integrated, and we're at a time where it makes sense companies might be cutting back on cloud spending and other software as a service applications. But I think Microsoft is going to be one of the last ones to go. And there's so much more they can. And I think one thing that kind of shows that is even though their PC sales were down, but their usage intensity is up 10%, which means people are spending more time on the Microsoft platforms, which is really an interesting metric to look at. And then there's so much opportunity that we talked about. And we touched on ChatGPT a lot, but personally, I'm even more excited about the Codex product, which powers GitHub's Copilot, which is basically AI that helps programmers. And it's super exciting to see that. And I mean, I've heard testimonials that like it's hard to code without it now. People are so used to it and it's so entrenched. So I think they're buying a super strong moat in that product as well. and they're at a reasonable valuation. So if you can't tell, I'm pretty excited about the opportunities here.
I think rightfully so. And I appreciate you sharing those charts as well that you pulled from Main Street Financial Data. And you're doing some work on the data viz there. Very helpful. Again, everyone, Zane Fracek, one of the hosts over at the Intern Investing podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, on
pretty much everywhere.
Pretty much everywhere. Check Zane out there via the medium that you prefer best. I appreciate you coming on, Zane. That's really helpful extra insight on what's going on at Microsoft.
Thanks for having me, Nick.